Hello and welcome to this bonus episode of the Story Nerd Podcast. I'm Valerie Francis. I'm a writer and a story editor, and I teach women who are writing in all genres how stories work so they can finish their books faster and without frustration. Today, I have a very special guest with me. A few months back, Matty Dalrymple was kind enough to interview me for the Self-Publishing with ALLi podcast, where we talked about the role of developmental editing in writing a breakout book. Now, ALLi, for anyone who doesn't know, stands for the Alliance of Independent Authors. Matty Dalrymple is the author of the Lizzie Ballard thrillers and the Anne Kinnear suspense novels and suspense shorts. She's a member of the International Thriller Writers and Sisters in Crime. Matty also podcasts, writes, speaks, and consults on the writing craft. She is a kindred spirit.
Yes, I am.
You are. That's why you're here.
Yes.
And the publishing voyage as the indie author. So you want to check out the indie author. Her articles have appeared in Writer's Digest magazine. She serves as the campaign manager for the Alliance of Independent Authors, and it is in that role as campaign manager for ALLi that's the reason she's here today. So Matty, welcome to Story Nerd.
Thank you. It's so exciting to be here. I am a story nerd myself and a fan of the podcast. And I just listened to the one about women talking.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm trying to gird myself for actually watching the movie because I had not watched the movie when I heard your analysis of it. But some of these days I'm going to toughen up and watch that and then re-listen to that episode.
It's a heavy film.
Yes.
That it's like watching a play, actually, because it all takes place in one setting. Most of it does. I know I could nerd out on that for hours, and Melanie and I might circle back and do a whole thing on it because there's so much in there.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That would be fascinating.
Yeah. We really have to keep a lot of discipline so our episodes aren't 3 and 4 hours long.
You might have a market for that. You never know.
Well, they're going to pay me a lot more money, I'll tell you that. All right. So, Matty, the listeners of Story Nerd, they're kind of all over the map insofar as their experience with publishing. So we've got New York Times bestselling authors who listen to this show, but we also have people who have never published anything before, and they're writing their very first book, whether it's fiction or a memoir. And so I wanted to have you on today to talk about publishing models, traditional, independent, what that all is about, and also about ALLi, because I recommend ALLi to everybody, no matter what publishing model people want to go into, because of the resources that are there.
Yeah.
Resources that you're just not going to find anywhere else, because it's all in one place, it's comprehensive, it just saves a lot of time, and it takes a lot of the fear out of it, a lot of the overwhelm out of it, because everything is right there, and it's just filled with experts, ALLi is. Now, before we go any further, full disclosure to everyone listening, I am an ambassador for ALLi. I want to get that out there. I am an independent author. I want to get that out there too, but I think that there's room for all publishing models, and will I continue to be strictly an independent author in the future? I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. I'm a member of ALLi myself and have been since I started this whole thing years ago. So I want to get that out of the way, because the purpose of this chat today is not to strong arm anybody into becoming an independent author. It is one of the publishing models available. It is a totally viable publishing model, and it works great for some people. It doesn't work so great for other people. So for anyone who is listening to this, if you have your heart set on a traditional publishing model, keep listening, because ALLi has something here for you too. It really, really does. And I'm sure, Matty, we're going to get into all of that as the episode goes on. But before we started recording, you told me that you have something that you call the A's, the B's, and the C's of traditional and indie publishing. So why don't you start by taking us through that?
Yeah, I have been a student of publishing. I've been an indie author since 2013, but I've been a student of publishing in all its forms during that time. I've been a fan of all those resources like podcasts out there, not only about craft, but also about business, and just love learning about the publishing world. And coming up on 300 episodes of the Indie Author Podcast, I've also gotten a chance to talk to a lot of authors in every arena of the publishing world, and I ended up boiling down what I was learning from them into the A, the B's, and the C's of the Indian traditional publishing paths. And so the A is authorpreneurship. And I think this is speaking to what you were referencing, that there are certain commonalities regardless of what path you take. And I think authorpreneurship is one of them. That idea that we'll be talking about this in a moment, but regardless of what path you take, you're going to have to take some business ownership of your author journey, your publishing journey. And that's important regardless of whether you're publishing yourself or somebody else is publishing you. And then, as you said again, I don't want to overlook the benefits of traditional publishing. And I have boiled these down into the B's of traditional publishing. So the B's are going to be traditional publishing. And the first one is bragging rights. And I only call it bragging rights in no way to denigrate that as an actual benefit, but just because it starts with a B. And I think another way to put this would be resume building. That it is undoubtedly cooler for someone to be able to say that they were published by Hachette or Tor Books or Book Couture or whatever that might be, than if I say I'm published by William Kingsville Publishers, which is my imprint. Not that that has any reference to the quality of the book, the quality of the writing, the quality of the production, but it is just cooler. You get more attention. And so bragging rights is a legitimate business and creative decision to decide to pursue traditional publishing. Another B that I see in the traditional world is bench strength. And so, as we'll be talking about in a moment, indie authors are responsible for, pretty much the entire scope of processes of publishing. But if you're with a reputable traditional publisher, then they have bench strength in areas of expertise. They have someone who knows all about social media. They know someone who is, an expert in production. They have experts in how to reach bookstores. And so tapping into people who are experts in those areas, tapping into that bench strength can definitely be a benefit. Another B of traditional publishing is brick and mortar bookstore shelves, maybe. I always put a maybe against that because I'll use Barnes & Noble here in the U.S. as an example. Could I get my independently published books into Barnes & Noble? Probably I could get them into the local Barnes & Noble if I spent enough time and effort and energy pitching them to the manager of that bookstore. Am I ever going to see them in a Barnes & Noble in Omaha? Probably not, because that's not how that works. And the whole traditional publishing industry is focused on getting books into bookstores. And one of the really illuminating things I heard from one of my guests on the Indie Author podcast, Leslie Penelope, who has been very successful in both indie and traditional publishing, is the idea that the bookstore is traditional publishing's ultimate customer. It is not the reader, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but they know how to get into bookstores. And so if your dream is to see your book on the shelves of Barnes & Noble or Waterstones or whatever the equivalent would be in your market, then that improves your chances, but it doesn't mean it's 100%, because the shelves are, even the traditional publishers are fighting for shelf space. So don't think of that as a guarantee. It's just maybe improving your chances a little bit. And then the fourth B of traditional publishing is back office tasks. And here again, I have a caveat, some. So if the idea of dealing with like sales taxes for your books, if you're selling direct, or those truly administrative back office tasks make your blood run cold, and you don't even want to hire somebody to manage that for you, you don't want to have anything to do with it, then that again can be a benefit of traditional publishing. They take care of some of those things for you. They do not take care of things like marketing necessarily, in the sense of taking that off you. They will certainly do marketing, but much of it is still left to the author. So that's sort of my encapsulation of talking with a lot of people about what are some of the benefits of traditional publishing. But I think that the biggest detriment of the traditional path is that you can choose to pursue traditional publishing, but you cannot choose to be traditionally published. The decision about whether your book gets into the hands of readers is with someone else. And oftentimes many someone else's. You could have a editor that's really rooting for you, and yet the marketing person doesn't know what shelf to put it on. The distribution person doesn't think that they can create the books on the schedule that's needed. And so there's a whole bunch of gatekeepers standing between you and the reader. And I think especially for people who are story nerds, story theory nerds, as would be true of the listeners of this podcast, that idea of writing a story and not being able to get it into the hands of readers, I think is the biggest detriment of traditional publishing. And the caveat I always like to add is that quality is necessary but not sufficient. And so there are, let's just assume that we're all experts. We've all perfected the craft of writing. We're all writing, award-winning level books, and it's still not a guarantee that you're going to get a deal, because your book might just not fit the needs of a certain publisher at that time. Your protagonist might share the same name as their ex-spouse. There are 1,000,001 reasons that somebody is not going to pick your book even though it's excellent. So against that, I have come up with the C's of indie publishing. And I think that the first one is creativity. So it is much easier for indie authors to follow sort of their creative muse. If you want to be writing vampire books set in a remote planet in the outer galaxy featuring animals, you could do that, because you're going to find an audience of people for whom that is the perfect book, and that would be a very hard sell to a traditional publisher. Another one is chronology. And I mean this in a couple of ways. One is that as an indie author, you can determine your own schedule. So, for example, I have the Lizzie Ballard thrillers. I have 5 books in the Lizzie Ballard thriller series. The Lizzie story is going to kind of wrap up with book 6, which I was working on. And then I had another idea. And it was a compelling enough idea that I decided to, sorry, Lizzie fans, put the Lizzie 6 book on hold while I worked on this other one, while I framed it out. And that's not something I could do if I had a publishing house waiting for me to turn in my manuscript of Lizzie Ballard 6. And the other aspect of chronology is that it always, as an indie, it always gives me the heebie-jeebies to go to like conferences that are heavily traditionally published representative, and have people say, "Oh yeah, my book was just picked up by a publisher," and you go, "Oh, that's great. When it's coming out, 2028." And you're like, "Are you serious? You're going to wait for 3 years or 2 years or even a year and a half if they're very efficient to get your book out there?" And so the chronology of traditional publishing was not appealing to me. Was one of the reasons I chose indie. Another C of indie publishing is care. And by care, I mean care of your backlist. And I think this is really the superpower, the secret superpower of indie publishing, is that unlike traditional publishers where you'll get, if you have a good publisher, you'll get a burst of attention and activity around the launch of your book. But 3 months later, 6 months later, a year later, they're not still going to be investing time and money into it because they have other books coming down the pipeline that they need to pay attention to. And I think this is also where the fact of bookstores being the customer is really key, because a bookstore is not really going to be interested in the book that was popular 2 years ago. They want the book that's popular now, and that's how the traditional publishing world, the traditional publishing market, organizes their activities. And so an indie author being able to care for your backlist is, I think, one of the reasons for another benefit of indie publishing that I'll get to in a moment. But I still run more ads to my first in-series books, which came out in 2013 and 2015, than I do any of my other books, because I'm hoping to lead people into the series and they'll read through the whole thing. A traditional publisher would never do that. They would never be investing time in books that were, years old. But that's where indie authors are making a lot of their cash, which is another C of indie publishing. And the cash setup of indie publishing appeals to me because, unlike traditional publishing where you get that spike of an advance, and then in the ideal world, you earn out, and then you earn further royalties, if you sell enough books that you've earned back the money they've paid you in advance. But many times that doesn't happen. Many times the only money a traditional traditionally published author will get is the advance. And so you get the big spike, but then maybe nothing ever again for that book, or maybe just a very small royalty percentage for more books that are sold. Whereas with indie publishing, there's that initial investment that you have to make that you don't have to make at least as much with a traditional publisher. But once you've made that investment in things like editing and cover design, then the cash is slow and steady over a period of time. And ideally, if you manage the care and feeding of your backlist well, it increases over time. So that's something that's always been appealing to me. An obvious C benefit of indie publishing is copyright. You own and manage your own IP. And so, it's all too easy to hear those sad stories of people who have signed away, all rights to all media in all geographies for all time to their publisher. And now they find out that the publisher has no intention ever of creating an audiobook, but they can't create an audiobook because they no longer own the rights. And so I think that this idea of owning your IP is one of the reasons that there are so many traditional publishers who are looking, considering indie publishing themselves more carefully, like Taylor Swift, for example, who independently published her own book because she knew she could get to the people who wanted the book. She didn't need marketing help. She didn't want to be giving away a percentage of her royalties to a publisher. So it's always fun to be able to point to Taylor Swift as an indie author. But there's so much you can do with your IP that a traditional publisher is probably beyond the capacity or the desire of a traditional publisher to capitalize on. Another C. And so think carefully about how you want to manage your copyright. And I'll also use this as a place to plug the fact that these decisions don't have to be made for a career. They can be made book by book. And so if you're exercising your authorpreneurship, the A, then as you're working on a book or when you get a book done, you're not going to say, oh, well, I've indie published all my other ones, so I'm going to indie publish this too. You should really be thinking of each one, making it an intentional decision for each one. Many traditional publishers, traditionally published authors are moving to indie publishing for the reasons I mentioned. Indie authors often are able to find traditional deals as a result of the success of their indie books. That happened with Leslie Penelope, who I mentioned before. It's happened to many other authors. So making that assessment book by book is an option you should consider. And then the final C, which is a pro or a con, depending on your perspective, is control. And so as an indie publisher, you're the CEO of your own business and you have to be making those decisions. You don't necessarily have to be doing all the work. I myself hate and am bad at finance. And so I hired somebody to do that. But nonetheless, I'm the person who's ultimately responsible. I'm the person who has to pick that person to help me, has to give that person direction. And so the control can be scary for some people. And if it's really scary for you, that could be another reason to want to go look at the trad route. But it's very empowering for some people. And I think that the people for whom the control is a draw are the ones that do best in the indie world. I'll just stop to take a breath, and because I know you probably have some thoughts about many of those things that I've said.
I have been showing great restraint. I muted myself, so I wasn't going to interrupt you every couple of minutes, but I have lots of notes. Okay. Yeah. So here's where my head is on this, because ultimately our careers as writers are ours, right? And too often I see, especially new writers who fair enough don't understand what this business is. Nobody knows what it is when they first start and they first come into it, because most of us don't know anyone in the industry that we can go to and say, so what is it really like to be a writer, like J.K. Rowling or Stephen King or Anthony Horowitz? Tell me we just don't know those people that we can talk to. So we all kind of come into it kind of with one arm tied behind our back. We're at a disadvantage, all of us, when we start. And so educating ourselves as authors, regardless of what publishing model we want, is, I think, job number one, educating ourselves about the craft, right? Which is what Story Nerd's all about. Like that's our piece of the pie. But also educating ourselves about the business of being a writer, and that's authorpreneurship. So I'm really glad that's where you started with that. And in terms of the B's and the C's, you're right. I totally agree with you that traditional publishing has certain advantages and indie publishing has certain advantages. And so how we want to develop our career really depends on where we are in our career right now. If we're on book one, we're not going to try to eat the whole elephant all at once, right? We're just focusing on book one and what can we learn from the process of bringing book one to market. I was waiting for you to say control. When you were on the C's, I'm like, she hasn't said control yet. Aha! And finally it came up. With the B's, the benefits of traditional publishing, the first one you said was bragging rights. That is third-party validation.
Yes.
And that I find is what a lot of writers, like that's their only goal. And they might get it. They might win a writing competition. They might get an offer from an agent, and that in and of itself is validation. They might hit some sales list, and that is the validation they're looking for. And then once they hit that goal, they realize, well, that doesn't automatically mean they're going to earn any money from it. And they realize that it's kind of hollow. Now, what it is a great marketing tool.
Yes.
100% it's a great marketing tool.
And it can be a great entree if there are auxiliary things in addition to your book. Like, I'm thinking this makes a lot of sense for nonfiction authors who want to attach, like, speaking engagements to their book. And so the bragging rights are very important, because if you go to an event organizer and you say, hey, so-and-so just came out with my book. Do you want me to speak to your group? You're just one step ahead of the people who may not have that on their resume. So yeah, there's sort of like the emotional third-party validation, and then there's the practical, like, career third-party validation.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
And no matter which publishing model we choose, we need a team, because nobody can do it alone.
Yeah.
So you and I have had this conversation before. Indie publishing is often called self-publishing, which is kind of hilarious because no one is doing it entirely themselves.
Right.
You just lose your mind if you try to
nobody
do it all
says,
yourself.
I went to see the self-produced movie. No, you say I went to see the indie movie because, there's a makeup artist and a director and the actors and the lighting guy. And yeah.
That's right. Absolutely. And so part of being a traditionally published author, part of what you're doing is looking for, well, maybe my agent can be part of my team. And if you get an agent and that's part of your team, that's great. But like you said, there's all these gatekeepers. So then you got to get through to the acquisitions editor at the publishing house. And then there's all these things that you have zero control over. You just have to believe in it and put it out to the cosmos that somehow everything will fall in line.
Yeah.
I've never heard of a 3-year wait before, but I don't doubt what you're saying. But
Well, I think it's probably getting shorter, because I think there are many ways. I mean, for many years, the indie authors were learning a lot from the traditional world. And I think now we're at the point where the traditional publishers are starting to learn from the indie authors, and they're starting to pick up some of the tips and understand the chronology that can be met better. And so I imagine that the 3-year wait is much less common than it used to be, but I still sometimes hear that, like 2 years from now. And I was like, oh, it would give me the heebie-jeebies.
I know. It just makes my heart sink.
Yeah, and then the book comes out, and how excited can you still be about it? Like, if you're going to go out on the road to promote it, which you're going to have to do, they're not going to take care of that for you. And now you have to remember that sense of excitement you had when you were actually working on it. It would be very difficult.
And you probably have to reread the book because you've moved on.
What did happen?
You've got 2 other books written by now. Like,
yes.
What was that a book about again?
Exactly.
So for the C's, I really like the creativity, because that's why we all get into this.
Yeah.
Right? That's the gateway drug.
Yes. Yeah.
Into this. We are compelled to write a story. or to tell a story in prose form. That we're wired that way. That's what we want to do. So for us to have, like for me, I have so many ideas, I don't know which one to work on next. But I meet other people who, they just have the one idea and they kind of have to see it through to the end.
Yeah.
And when they see it through to the end, then they'll get another idea and they have to see that one through to the end. Well, that's great. But then who is someone else to tell you that there's no room for you right now?
Yeah.
I was talking to, I'm sure Melanie won't mind me saying this. Melanie was telling me a story of someone that she spoke to recently who, for most of his career, was a big deal in the publishing industry, traditional publishing industry. He is now out on his own as a freelancer. And he said of publishing, they're waiting to see what's going to be a hit first, and then they're looking for that. So publishing companies are loath to take a chance and to publish something that's a little different or new. Now we hear the same thing with film, same thing with television, same thing with music. I mean, Dolly Parton is an indie artist, right? If it's good enough for Dolly, man, it's good enough for me. It's all I can say about that.
Yeah, and then you're also fighting against that time lag, because if the space alien vampire animals are like the hot thing, and suddenly they're saying, oh, we want more of that, and now it's 3 years later, and maybe people's interests have moved on from space animal vampires. You're kind of stuck.
You're kind of, because you've just spent 3 years writing one.
Yes.
The other thing that you raised there, you've raised many things, but the other thing I want to highlight is the copyright. No matter what publishing model you want to follow, don't miss the importance of IP. It is so, this is why Dolly Parton became an indie artist, because she realized that this was her IP, this was her creation, and she didn't want to just give it away. And in one interview I heard with her, she said, well, she asked the question, well, what's involved in me keeping it? And someone said, oh, well, you have to form your own company, which is, and she said, well, what does that mean to form my own company? This, we have to fill in this paperwork. And she's like, really? That's it? Paperwork? I can do paperwork. It's the reason she wouldn't allow Elvis to record I Will Always Love You, because part of the deal, if Elvis recorded your song, was that he owned the IP. And she said, you can't have it.
Yeah.
Which killed her. However, down the road, Whitney Houston recorded it. It's still Dolly's IP.
Yeah.
That one song alone is enough to keep her empire going.
Yeah.
Right? Never mind all the other songs that she still owns. Jolene, someone wants to record Jolene? Sure. You can record it. I still own it. So I'm making money off of your recording.
Yeah.
Right? So this is, I really want people to listen to this. If you don't know what we mean by IP, if you don't know what all of the ins and outs of it are, I mean, Matty, you and I could talk for 2 hours just on that.
Yeah.
Please, please, please educate yourself. Please. It's so important. And, this sort of brings me to ALLi.
Yes.
And why I recommend ALLi to so many people. Half the time I don't even ask what their publishing model is, what their dream is for publishing their book. Because there's advantages to both, and there are hybrid authors who sort of pull on the advantages of both.
Yes.
Absolutely. Totally valid. What I really like about ALLi and why I recommend it all of the time, and why I approached you to become an ambassador officially, even though I've been doing it unofficially for years, is the education you get. There are so many resources in there. So many things that I'm sure most writers have never even thought of, because especially if you're working on your first book, because you're so overwhelmed just trying to figure out how to write this first book.
Yeah.
Fair enough. If that's where you are, then focus on that. But just put a little flag there, a little note to self that at some point you need to start educating yourself, and just take it a little bit at a time, a step at a time, one idea at a time, and learn the resource. ALLi has something called the Watchdog Desk. I want you to tell us more about this, because if the watchdog desk is the only resource you tap into, I promise you it's worth the membership. Because it's the only thing I tapped into for ages. Because I was so overwhelmed and there was so much in there. And I wasn't ready for most of it, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
Tell us about this watchdog desk. What is it and why am I so enthusiastic about it?
Well, the watchdog desk is there to try to avoid the painful lessons that one hears about in the writing community. And it is basically a service headed by John Doppler, our watchdog, and also Michael Aran, who is ALLi's outreach manager, in addition to being the guy behind Author Level Up. And we have, if anyone goes to selfpublishingadvice.org, which is ALLi's companion website that does not require membership to access, it has loads and loads of the kinds of information that you're talking about. If you go to selfpublishingadvice.org/ratings, you will get to the Watchdog Desk rating service. And what we do is we take a look at services and awards. Those are two separate ratings offerings. And we rate them based on their transparency, their compliance with ethics, their compliance with ALLi's code for partner organizations. And so this is great when you get to the point in your career where you're looking for a publishing partner, you're looking for that to build that team, you're trying to decide whether you want to purchase a certain service to help you on the way. And the Watchdog Desk at ALLi does that assessment for you, and you can go and search through the Watchdog records and find out what they have to say. The other resource I always like to mention here, which is not affiliated with ALLi, but is another great resource, is Victoria Strauss's Writer Beware. And Writer Beware is a blog that Victoria Strauss has done for many, many years. And it's specifically focused on identifying the bad guys in the publishing world. And that is really informative, kind of horrifying, but informative to read, even if you're very early in your author career, because, it's kind of like reading the expose journalism stories, but it really gives you a good sense of the kinds of things to watch out for. And so, you'll get this sense of, I see that there's this trend of, the bad guy sending out letters as if they're from legitimate organizations, and making offers as if they're representing the legitimate organization, and people falling for this because the logo is there, it's beautifully written, it looks very legitimate, and they don't know to or how to research that. And so that's that combination of the ALLi Watchdog Desk and Victoria Strauss's Writer Beware blog and newsletter are a great way to avoid being taken advantage of. And I think it's so important, especially for writers, because, we've been talking all along about the importance of writers getting their work into people's hands. And oftentimes that comes with, I need a marketing plan. I need someone who's going to get me on the bestseller list or whatever. I'm going to pay this person thousands, maybe tens of thousands of dollars, and they're guaranteeing that I'm going to, win awards or what have you. And because it's such a product of our heart, I think we're more susceptible to those kinds of approaches than if it was about our car or about, something that maybe we don't feel that emotional attachment to.
100%.
Yeah.
I agree with you completely. And again, full disclosure, I am a partner member of ALLi. I'm in the partner directory. And I did it for this reason, because there are so many scam artists out there.
Yeah.
I thought, okay, if I have fallen victim to it. I'm ashamed to admit, but early in my career when I didn't know, they sounded legit. They did a good sales job on me, and they got my money, and then poof, they were gone.
That is really painful.
Well, it was an important lesson learned, and one of the reasons why I keep sending people to ALLi for awareness. And sometimes people come to me after they've lost their money. Sometimes they come to me when they're not sure if this is a legit organization or person or what have you. So that's why I became a partner member of ALLi, so that because there's a vetting process.
Yes.
You can't. It's not just to pay your money and you're in.
Yeah.
They ALLi checks to make sure you're legit, and that you are delivering what you say you're delivering and all that kind of stuff, which is important. The other thing that I really want to make people aware of, and you already alluded to it, is that if you decide, for example, that you're going to indie publish your first book, and the first book is going out and it's making its way in the world, and then you want to traditionally publish a book in your second book or your third book, you can still do that. Or if you decide you really like indie publishing and you like running your own company, and sort of your left brain is really happy while your right brain is happy creating the stories, and you get 2 or 3 books out, and then you're doing sales well, like you're a Colleen Hoover style writer, and you're starting to pick up sales, and the traditional publishing companies come, hovering around. They start sniffing you out and find out what's there. ALLi does have a literary partner, like a partner with a literary agency, who can help you navigate that. So it's not a closed, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not a closed society where you're either with us or you're against us. It's not that at all.
Very much. Yeah, you're referring to Ethan Ellenberg. Ethan Ellenberg is the literary agency that ALLi works with, and can help pave the way to things like, film rights and things like that. So even with an individual book, it's important also to think it's definitely not a decision for an entire career, and even for an individual book. There are options like, I'm going to contract with this company to do the print edition, and I'm going to keep the ebook rights, or I'm going to keep the audiobook rights, or, you can have Europe, but I'm going to have the US, or, there are many ways to slice and dice it. And if you're knowledgeable about those things, then it can, you can make your IP really work for you.
And that is one of the secrets to J.K. Rowling's financial success.
Yeah.
Because she sold the print rights only. So anyone who's thinking back, for years, the only way you could get a Harry Potter book was as a print book. She held the digital rights. She held the audio rights. She held the rights to all her characters and all that kind of stuff. So yes, she gets obviously a piece of the print deal, but now she didn't lose any of the other stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas an interview I saw with Margaret Atwood in the last year or two, the journalist, when Handmaid's Tale was really starting to take off, when the TV show was really starting to take off, the journalist said, wow, I mean, did you ever think in this stage of your life you'd be earning so much money? And she said, what are you talking about? Well, the Handmaid's Tale is huge. And she said, I don't earn any money off of that.
Wow.
She said, I sold the rights to that book to the publishing company when it came out, and that's it.
Yeah.
So she sold everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I think J.K. Rowling was really forward-thinking. She was really ahead of her time in terms of understanding the power of retaining your IP as much as possible. Keep as much as you can.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Well, Matty, listen, I could talk to you all day about this, and I want to encourage anyone who's listening, if you've got questions, by all means, pop me an email. And if you want Matty to come on again to answer some of these questions, I'm sure, I'm speaking for you now, I'm sure you'll come on and entertain us again for a little while. In the meantime, tell us where we can find out more about ALLi and more about you.
Well, thank you so much. So for more information on ALLi, you can go to allianceindependentauthors.org, allianceindependentauthors.org. That is basically, I'll simplify by saying, the membership site. And you can go to selfpublishingadvice.org. That is the site that is open to anyone. It has our blogs, our podcasts, our, you name it. You could spend the rest of your life, as you had said earlier, just perusing information at selfpublishingadvice.org. And then if you'd like to learn more about me, you can find my fiction at mattydalrymple.com. That's Matty with a Y, M-A-T-T-Y. And if you'd like to find out more about my nonfiction, you can find that at theindieauthor.com, and that's Indie with a Y.
Matty, thank you so much for coming to Story Nerd today.
Thank you so much. This has been such a fun conversation. Thank you.